fair to ask within the evolutionary paradigm to say what caused this type of diversification? Populations, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And so, then the next question after that becomes, if we have multiple different populations, we know that some populations are related to each other because they can interbreed.
No, wait. Hold on a second. Hold on. We're not asking what might be related. What we're asking is populations themselves would need to be the product of evolution. But if you say things are related, you're already granting yourself populations.
Would you agree that within populations, certain animals are related to each other? Like domestic dogs, for example, are they related? Are they part of the same kind?
And the standard for relatedness is genetic makeup, phenotype, genotype? Because you would also say that we're related to a banana, right?
I would. I'm asking you, do you think domestic dogs are related to each other?
If the presupposition is everything's related, then saying...
I'm not presupposing that.
You just said it.
As an observation, would you say that we can observe certain animals are related to each other, like domestic dogs, for example?
Yeah, that they're similar in a type of family, if you will.
Okay, so you think that all domestic dogs are in the same kind?
In a category. They are a universal category. Would you agree?
A universal category. I'm not
like
sure.
Like a dog. Like if I said, what's a dog, you would know what I'm referring to, right?
Maybe. Well, you could be referring to the domestic dog, which is a species, or a canidae, which is a family, which includes things like wolves, foxes.
Yeah, let's go to the bigger one then. Let's go to the canidae.
Great.
If the canines, you would say canine is a universal category, right?
It's a family. It's a label that we put on a bunch of organisms.
Okay. Is it objective or is it ever changing? Is it static or changing?
Our understanding of it changes.
No, not your understanding. Does the thing itself, if evolution was true, there was once a thing that wasn't the canine family, right?
There used to be things that weren't canines, yes.
And became canines. So you're saying that a universal category, under evolutionary view, a universal category, canine, actually came from a universal category that isn't canine, right? That's the claim?
Yeah, certain traits and characteristics evolve over time. Yeah, that's my claim.
Can you tell me which universal category came before the canine and where and how you know the switch happened?
Yeah, so within canine evolution, carnivorians evolved about 50 million years ago. And this is thought to be the split between like descendants and dog-like descendants. Caniforms are the dog-like, Peliforms are cat-like.
Now that's a claim, right? That's the assertion. So how do you know the moment a universal category, what'd you call it? You're using the Latin, right?
No, this is just the scientific name, carnivorian.
Carnivorian. How did you determine when the shift happened between carnivorian and canine?
Well, you can never pinpoint a moment because evolution happens across populations over many generations.
That's an assertion. Like, what did I say in my open? I said, you're going to get drowned in incomprehensible levels of gradualism, a story about the past. You say, oh, this came from that. And I go, how do you know that? And you say, we can't know. And I'm asking, why would you make a claim that you can't know?
Do you think that dogs are all descendant from wolves? Do you think a wolf is the ancestor of all modern domestic dogs?
Domesticated? Yeah, I would call that a type of engineering.
Selective breeding, right?
Well, we can manipulate that, and yeah, sure. We can demonstrate the manipulation, but it doesn't not become a dog. What's in question isn't whether or not things are in the same family. I'll ask the question again. Why would you make the claim that carnivorian is a universal category of an animal that precedes but morphs into the canine? And I ask you, how is it you know that? And your answer is, I don't, because it's too gradual.
Well, so I don't know if you've heard of the law of monophyly, but this is basically the principle that you can never outgrow your ancestor's clade. So once an organism is a carnivorian, it stays a carnivorian forever. Once an organism is a dog, it stays a dog forever. You can't grow out of your ancestor's clade.
I understand.
If you move backwards in time, you can find organisms that don't belong to the same clades that we do.
I understand what you're saying. It's not the thing itself the category itself morphing into a new category. I understand. But what you are saying is that there is a distinct category called carnivorian. And then that category either continues to exist alongside the new category that's branching out for it, or it dies out, right?
Modern dogs are still considered carnivorians.
So the category shift didn't happen.
What do you mean it didn't happen?
If canine is also the same category as carnivorian, you're making a distinction with no difference then. So you're saying a species branched out from another one, but now you've collapsed the species.
Have you ever heard of taxonomy?
Yes, it's an arbitrary way of categorizing things in the here now, but falls apart when you do look at large schemes of time, which I'm demonstrating.
Also, taxonomy is theft.
Well, I agree with something you said in your opening, which is that a species is kind of a fuzzy subject. It's not like a really concrete idea, because different organisms, while they may look, like the same species, we might consider them different species because they live in different areas. We never see them breeding, or they're incapable of breeding with each other through like reproductive barriers, or they can reproduce, but they make infertile offspring. So the question becomes, if you agree that all dogs share a common ancestor, you understand that one organism can evolve and diversify into other different looking organisms. You can get everything from a Chihuahua to a Great Dane, a huge amount of variety, all from one common ancestor. So you agree with the mechanism.
No, you contradicted yourself. You said the term species doesn't really exist. It's kind of fuzzy. And I agree. Under the evolutionary view, it's actually completely arbitrary and fuzzy. You can't even tell me where one starts, one ends. But then in the next sentence, you say dogs, that's a universal category that you're assuming is a type of species that does in fact exist in its way. But you said organisms. Well, are organisms groups of populations, or are they nominal? Is it a distinct is there only one type of dog that it's itself? Does that make sense? There's only whatever you call a dog. There's 10 dogs. Are you arguing that those dogs aren't actually a part of an objective group, only a ostensible group that we just, for the sake of taxonomy, put in the same category, but they're not actually in the same category?
We make categories or clades of animals and organisms based on their common ancestry. So we make, say, like the clade of Canidae, where all canines come together. We know that all canines share a common ancestor, which I think you agreed with, or at least you agreed domestic dogs share a common ancestor. And so every clade you move back towards is a common ancestor, and every organism that belongs to that clade shared the same common ancestor. So, for example,
that's what you're saying is the case, but I'm asking a different question. You keep referring to these universal categories that you also deny actually exist. So I'm trying to get to, is it the case, just a yes or no, is it the case that a thing called a category like Canidae or a dog, is it the case that
Canidae, isn't that our neighbors up north, Canidae, huh?
Actually exists as
a Canidae keeps the doctor away,
a category, or is that a fuzzy morphing category that you can't really put brackets around?
It's an interesting question.
Yeah, so this is obviously out of my range of expertise, but I do like listening. The questions that I have is because, Jed over here even acknowledges is like, well, we can't pinpoint exactly when the change happens because it happens over millions of years. And so I was like, yeah, that is true. We can't observe it happening. Therefore, if we can't apply the scientific method, which these people are always, going on and on about science and stuff, us Christians here, we're just science deniers and they're the experts of science. But if we can't apply the scientific method to it, then how do we even know that that is actually what's happening? And again, how does it work? Like, so if I, as a human, wanted to evolve into a type of human that could also survive underwater, how can I go about doing that? Do I have to spend a few hours a day in the ocean? Do I have to hold my breath longer and longer? And then once I die, then what happens then? Does my children, do I have to have them do it? Like, how does this exactly work?
Humans like to put things in boxes. We like to label things and categorize things. And life sometimes doesn't really care what we think. We can do our best to categorize animals, but then nature can surprise us.
So the question is dog, let's say dog, because there's giraffe, there's dog, there's elephant. We don't argue that these are the same things, right? To talk about them, we reference them in universal categories, and in the universal category, right? But then underneath that, we subcategorize them, right? So
right, exactly.
But for the sake, I understand, for the sake of doing something we think is making order out of the animals, I'm not asking whether or not it's useful to categorize things. I'm not asking if humans like to categorize things. I'm asking, in the evolutionary view, is a category of a thing, like dogs, like Canidae, like carnivorian, are those actual categories objectively, or are they in flux and changing?
These categories are labels that humans have made up to put animals in boxes. And the categories could be different if humans decided otherwise. A lot of the categories or clades that we come up with are based on the fossil record and whether certain organisms share characteristics with other organisms.
Okay. So would you argue that evolution posits that there's a thing called speciation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And we've observed it.
Okay, hold on. If premise one is species is an arbitrary bracket system, totally made up by humans arbitrarily in time, and is ultimately fuzzy, that you can't really have access to this species you think you're calling a species, but you're also
and how come we don't have any humans right now that could survive underwater? Like, how come there were never? Is there? I mean, we've been in the ocean, we do diving a lot, so how come we don't? If this could happen, like, how come we don't see that now?
saying that evolution relies on speciation. How is it that you can rely on speciation if you actually deny the objectivity of a species?
So one common definition of a species is an organism that's reproductively isolated. And so when I use a term like speciation, typically what I mean is here's one organism that diversified into two groups which have become reproductively isolated.
Okay. So if a bunch of humans that look a certain way, share a bunch of traits, suddenly can't reproduce with all the other humans, are they no longer human?
No, you always remain a human because you can't grow out of your ancestors' clade. That's the rule of monophily. So we would still all be humans, but maybe we would form some new clade to call these reproductively isolated humans.
Well, I'm saying they're always going to be a human until they die out. Okay, so if they're always going to be human until they die out, how is it that under the evolutionary view, isn't it the case that one clade actually branches off into something entirely differently? Like, are you an ape?
Yeah, absolutely. So are you.
I'm an ape. Is George Floyd an ape?
George Floyd is an ape, yes, or was an ape when he was alive. Yeah, we're all apes. All humans are apes.
Okay.
I was dying when he said that, when he brought up the George Floyd. Was George Floyd an ape? Yeah, obviously trying to get him in some kind of it's a potential racist gotcha, but hey, I'll give it to him. He's consistent. He said it. Yeah, George Floyd was an ape, but he caveats that with, but all humans are apes. And yeah, I again, like, how is it that we were the only ones? Like, if we're apes, how is it that we're the only ones that evolved into this level that we're at now? Like, how come we were the only ones to have like consciousness, like in terms of what's the word I'm thinking of, where we could like logic and cognitive abilities and reasoning, and we're not just covered. I mean, we have hair all over our bodies, but we're not covered in hair like the gorillas are. And then how come how is it that we're the only ones? How come there's no other types of human still in the world? Like, how come, like, you have all sorts of apes, right? You have like gorillas, you have chimpanzees, and all these different types of apes. But like, or is chimpanzee a monkey? You know what I'm trying to say, though? Like, you have all these different types of apes. How come there's not different types of humans, that could do different type of things? Like, yeah, you do have like humans that are like, like, for instance, Asians, they have, their eyes are different. You have Africans that, they're darker in skin. Like, you have those different types of humans, but we're all like the same pretty much. Like we're all the same. Like just because they have different traits, like the eyes or the skin color, or even the hair texture, we're still all like human beings. It's not like there's not different types of, just like with the apes, there's not different types of apes, and this ape could do this, and this ape could do that, and this ape is bigger than the other one. You know, how is it that if evolution was a thing, there's only like one type of human pretty much?
So if we're an ape, so if you think we're an ape, why do we make a distinction between human and ape?
Well, one thing, we're reproductively isolated. So humans and say like gorillas, when we think of the colloquial term of ape, we can't reproduce and create viable offspring with gorillas. That's one way that we can determine.
Hold on. Okay, hold on. But now you're in a contradiction, because I just used the same hypothetical and I asked you if there's all these humans right now, and there's this new mutation or whatever that produces a bunch of humans that can't reproduce with all the previous humans that produced it. You said that would still be a human, right?
No.
But now that's is that a new category, or right? What is that? Because now you've made a distinction between ape and human, but now you said if the new human arises from the same process that the human arises from the ape, a new human, you're saying it's still a human. But when we emerge, right, we're humans now, right? Why human?
Well, so like another category we could look at is primates. So humans and gorillas are both primates, but we can no longer reproduce. We're still primates. So like if someday two groups of humans were completely isolated, like say people go to Mars and then there's no travel back and forth for millions of years, we would still call them humans. They'd still belong to the clade of hominid, but they might diversify and we might call them some new species.
Okay. And do you have any reason to believe the humans we have today could branch off into a subcategory that's still called human, that you'd still grant as human but can't reproduce?
The only way I could think of that happening is some isolation event, like if humans travel to Mars, for example. But in the world we live in now, there's so much travel and there's so much interbreeding amongst humans. The possibility that we could ever become reproductively isolated with other humans is incredibly low.
Okay, let's get a little more granular here. Do you believe that something as functional as the liver was produced by whatever mechanism you're assuming is evolution?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically your argument appeals to irreducible complexity. The liver could not have evolved. Oh, sorry.
No. I'm arguing that I'm not arguing something can't happen. I'm actually just getting what your position is. And are you saying random mutation produced a liver?
Yes.
Okay. Would you agree that the liver serves a very specialized function?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Are you saying that a random process produced a very specialized function?
Yes. Now that always happens in gradual stages. So bringing back the clock, we can see one, and I'll fully admit I'm no expert on liver evolution, but when we look at, with any complex organ, we can see it slowly and gradually evolving over time. So another common example creationists will point to is the human eye as something that's irreducibly complex. You can't get an eye because if you remove one part, then the whole thing becomes.
I'm not making that argument. I'm actually would rather you stick to what I'm cross-examining here, which is if you believe random mutation produced a liver, you're saying that some random process produced hyper-specific tasks within a body. But not only that, but the liver itself as an isolated item also works in conjunction with other highly specific, hyper-specific, accidental, task-oriented mechanisms. What I wanted to ask you is, if it's the case that evolution produced the liver gradually, notice how he went back to the incomprehensible level of gradualism. If it's the case that a liver was produced from random mutation to specialize in filtering toxins and expelling them from the body, isn't it true that whatever earlier organism produced this through random mutation lived a long time without the liver?
So my understanding is most invertebrates do not have a liver, and most vertebrates do have a liver. Is that true? Yeah. That's correct. So we have plenty of organisms that don't have livers and manage to survive.
That's not the question. The question is, if you believe that the liver was produced through random mutation over many, many years of time through many, many populations, isn't it the case that whatever produced the liver accidentally also lived without the liver for many, many years?
No, because evolution happens not within one organism, but within a population. So you're not going to have one individual who lived without a liver and then with a liver.
Mm-hmm. Wait, well, no, it would necessarily be so that even in populations, there is a population that must precede what we now call the vertebrates. So if it's the case that evolution produced the liver, that means that the liver once didn't exist, in simple terms, yes?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And we still have organisms living alongside those which don't have livers.
I understand, but we're not talking about those organisms because we're looking at organisms that live without livers, right? Are they producing a liver?
Not that I know of.
Okay, we're talking about the one that you claimed ended up producing the liver and the mechanism that produces a liver. If your mechanism to produce a liver is mutations over time, I'm asking a very simple question here, which is if evolution, the process of random mutation within populations, produce the final form of what we call the liver, right? That does what the liver does. Isn't it the case that whatever ancestors, in this case you'd call them ancestors, didn't those ancestors not have a liver? It's a really simple question.
Yeah. If you go back far enough in the evolutionary history, you'll find organisms without a liver.
Okay, and can you tell me from the evolutionary standpoint, given that you're appealing to random mutation, natural selection, how it is, mechanistically how it is, not that it happened over time, but mechanistically, how is it that non-liver organisms produce accidentally a functioning liver?
Well, I can tell you the mechanism, which is, you've already said it, random mutation selected for by natural selection. So if an organism produces some sort of proto-liver or some sort of really simple way of filtering toxins from its body, it's going to have a better time surviving. It's going to have a better chance of survival if it has some rudimentary toxicity filter. And so that rudimentary toxicity filter chain evolves over time through more and more random mutations until eventually you get to a modern.
I understand you're saying that it did happen though. Well, that first step, right? You said if you have an organism that has some sort of proto-liver, now you're giving yourself a proto-liver. I'd ask the same thing. How does an animal accidentally, through random mutation, develop a proto-liver from not a proto-liver?
You just said the mechanism. It's random mutation guided by natural selection.
No. Mechanistic.
See, he contradicts himself because, he's saying, well, it's random. But then later on, I think in the gauntlet section, when it's like everyone's in there, he later on then says, oh, no, actually, well, this species didn't evolve because there was nothing to trigger it. So it's like, well, wait a minute. Is it random or does something have to trigger it? I would think that if I was on the side of evolution, that something would have to trigger it. But, I'm not an expert on this stuff. But he contradicts himself. He says, well, it's random. So just some species just randomly start growing a liver out of nowhere, Hey, eventually I might just start, us as a human species just might start randomly growing a third arm right here. You never know. It's just random, it's just, oh, okay, here's the third arm.
Look, if I ask you how does if I asked you how does an espresso machine work, right? You wouldn't just say a term. You would actually go into the schema of it mechanically. The engineers could explain how it is mechanistically. I'm asking you a more precise question.
Sure. So whenever an organism reproduces, albeit asexually or sexually, there's going to be copying errors in genes. So when a gene copies itself, sometimes it copies itself incorrectly. Sometimes it switches an amino acid with something else. Sometimes it duplicates itself or deletes itself. So there's all these mutations, and that's the mechanism through which new organs and new characteristics can manifest.
I know, but you're saying that they can do that, like specific.
So, okay, so that's true. So let's say when it's copying itself, oh, it fucked up somewhere. And so now it adds this prototype, a liver prototype. But even then, so what is it just the beginning of the liver? Like, is it just the beginning stages? Like, oh, okay, here's this. And then how does it keep developing though? Like if it's just an error, like a gene copying error or something like that, well, then how does it keep progressing into a fully functioning liver as time goes on?
how is it the case that random,
like, why wouldn't it just, I think Jim Bob's going to ask this, but yes, how is it that it's going to, like, it screws up, and so it makes this proto liver or whatever, but how does the next generation, how does it keep developing if it's just an error? So what, it just, like, how does it fully function into this fully precise liver that has a specific function?
mutations, in this case, specific
Yeah, it seems too specific to, sorry, it seems too specific to just be an error.
specifically produce a proto liver that becomes even a better, more specialized liver. Take me through you're just telling me the chapters of the story, and I'm asking for the mechanisms. Like, so if I said, how are cars produced? And you said, well, there's a plant that makes them. And I would say, how are they produced? Like, what is the process in which a car is produced? You'd have to break down all of the conveyor belts, all of how the parts are made, what they're made of, how they operate together. You're just saying that a liver was produced and appealing to some sort of like mysterious journey of an organism in a population that just for no reason develops the capacity to process toxins, when in reality, the same organism that accidentally produces something to process toxins was alive enough to process to not be affected by toxins for long enough to process a new thing. So it's like, why is it that an accidental process giving something an advantage that it doesn't actually need? And right, you're appealing to mutation. So this, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to pause you right there. So you said mutations that it doesn't actually need. Now, I think that's where I might interject, because a beneficial mutation is going to enhance the chance of survival. So if a mutation happens and it enhances the survivability or enhances the likelihood an organism is going to reproduce, then that trait is going to become more highly distributed amongst the population. So it's not like all the ones living alongside it that don't have that trait immediately die off. Sometimes you get divergent evolution where one new trait forms, and that's when you have a speciation event. So the organism prior doesn't instantly go extinct because a new trait manifests.
I understand that, but even other evolutionary proponents agree with me that you're actually just looking after the fact, after the story is told, and say, look, those sharp venom fangs that deliver venom, those were accidental, but in the long term, they were very advantageous. But that's a different statement than saying they were developed for advantage. Well, they weren't, because they're accidentally developed. So you can't have a teleological view of purpose, or lowercase telos, like, oh, I got to develop this lung to process oxygen, or I got to develop this liver to fight toxins and transform them and expel them. The organism, from your view, doesn't have any direction. It's, first of all, the step toward proto-liver, even if I granted that first part of the story, it's accidentally producing a proto-liver, right? Each next phase of developing the proto-liver is also an accident. So it doesn't just go, oh, look, this is working. Why? Because these organisms don't have evaluation systems. They don't evaluate from the evolutionary view. They don't evaluate the enhancement of the system. It's just as likely that another mutation from this view offsets the trajectory of a developing liver. Now, the problem with your view is just the liver as an example demonstrates how nebulous this process is. But guess what? That has to develop independently, but also alongside, in parallel, in conjunction, working together with all of the other organs in our bodies or other vertebrates' bodies, including the heart, blood vessels, super highways to deliver things, processing the ability to process hemoglobin and the rest of it, right? The brain, we don't even get into the brain. The problem here is Jed here can't even tell me mechanistically how. He tells me that it happened, but I ask, how does random mutation produce a liver? He says, natural selection and random mutation. How does it produce a liver mechanistically? How is he go from point A?
But yeah, and the thing is too, is that like, again, because he says it's just some random mutation. Okay, but again, like Jim Bob's saying, yes, it also has to work like internally. Yes, it has to work alongside all of your other functioning organisms as the human species evolves. But okay, so but also, how does it work? Like, if one person develops some kind of genetic error, as he puts it, okay, well, what about everybody else? I mean, so what happens? Is it just over millions of years? This person develops this genetic anomaly, and then his children develop the genetic anomaly as well? Or do they, what if they don't also develop it? Because that's just an anomaly. So what if it dies off at some point? Like, and is it just these people just with this genetic anomaly just keep spreading over time? What about all the other people that don't have this genetic anomaly? Do they not survive as well? Like, do they not, like I said, like, how is it that there are no different types of humans? You know, how come there's not any humans that don't have a liver, and then there are humans that do have a liver? How come there's humans that have this ability to do this, and then you don't have these type of humans that, how come you don't have different types of humans if this were the case? How come all of us humans all seem to have the same body parts, other than some differences? Like, yeah, you have people who are midgets, you have some people who are born with Down syndrome or something. Like, yes, you have these differences, but they're not different species. We don't consider midgets like, oh, they're just their own species of humans. They're smaller, yes, but we consider it like a genetic defect, not oh, this is a new species over here. Like, they still have all the same things that us normal size people have. It's just that there's a defect there that causes them to not grow past a certain height. So once again, I just asked, then how come there's not different types of human species?
Point B. If you're asking me what organism had, or what's the specific gene that had a mutation that caused a liver, I don't know. I'm not an expert on liver evolution. So that's a really hyper fixated example, and I'm not going to be able to give you a really detailed answer about liver.
But this is like what you believe, though. This is what you're here to debate. This is your belief system that evolution is true, and here's why. So you should be able to at least kind of answer it to the best of your ability. But if you can't even fathom, or like, if you can't even think about how the liver evolves over time specifically, and how this actually works, because even me, just right now thinking about it, I'm like, holy shit, like, it's super complicated. It's super complicated. Like, yes, we do need an explanation. How would this exactly work? Because, like Jim Bob brought up, it's not even just externally, it's about what's going on internally as well. Like, how does it work? And if he can't answer, well, I mean, I think he lost the debate.
Liver evolution, because I don't know. Now, you said something, you mentioned how evolution does not act with intentionality. And that's absolutely true. Evolution does not have an intention. So you never see an organism think, oh, I could really use venom in my fangs, so I think I'm going to go ahead and evolve those. No, so the venom in the fangs is another instance of random mutation resulting in a beneficial adaptation, which allows the organism to more sufficiently defend itself, which allows it to reproduce more.
But how does that work, though? Like, again, so let's say there's this one defect where this one random, spider or something, it develops poison. Well, how does it evolve to regulate the poison, and also instinctually know, oh, hey, I could use this to, hurt my enemies, kill my enemies, and defend myself? How does it not even evolve to? It's just like, how would it regulate the poison in the first place? Yeah, like, that's what I'm trying to say. It's like, it's a completely complicated system. And so these people, like, they'll call us stupid because, we believe the Bible and stuff. But I could argue, like, they're stupid because their belief system, like, they don't have any of these answers for it.
Yeah, I know. That's just another story, though. Like, that's the thing, is like, if I said, oh, look, a venomous snake has a very hyper-specific combination of proteins, right, that not only develop inside glands, the snake needed to develop the glands. So do they develop the glands accidentally and then accidentally pack it with what happens to be perfectly suited for dissolving the inside of rats specifically?
Yeah.
Why couldn't it be the case that they developed a B12 shot, Jed?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of animals will have evolution where they're evolving alongside each other, like an evolutionary arms race, where like a rat and a snake might evolve in ways where the I don't know if this is a perfect example. The rat might get faster and faster at avoiding the snake, whose venom gets better and better. So you have different organisms. One might be a prey animal, one is a predatory animal, and they're in an evolutionary arms race where they're constantly evolving better and better tactics to either stay alive or defeat their opponent.
Jed, I'm sorry, but that is assuming intentionality. Tactic
absolutely.
No. Tactic means that there's towardness. So is the tactic to survive?
The likelihood that they survive is the non-random selection of random mutations.
Do things accidentally survive, or do they develop tactics to survive?
Animals develop characteristics through random mutations, and then natural selection makes them more likely to survive with those characteristics and pass them on to their offspring.
I understand, but that's not the question. I understand your view on random mutation.
Yeah. So again, he's deflecting from the details here. It's once again, he's, as Jimbo puts it, he's telling them chapters of the story, but he's not getting into what happens inside those chapters.
And which is, I would say, you're consistent with the evolutionary view generally, which is animals accidentally, through random mutation and natural selection, develop things that at the time they don't even know will be or are advantageous. And because they're advantageous accidentally, they're able to survive longer than the other ones who don't have it, right? Even though there's tons of snakes that don't have venom that survive just fine, the question is, well, they also develop some technique. Well, the problem is with the view is like you have to choose. You either take an approach that all of it's accidental with no purpose, that removes that there's an actual purpose to the heart. That means you have to say when a heart is stops working, it's not actually dysfunctional, right? From your view?
No, organs. If an organ stops working, then we could call it dysfunctional because it's no longer operating how we would expect it to.
Well, not just expect, right? Because the heart has, like the liver, it's not just how we expect it to operate, but that it operates with a specific purpose in the context of the body. It's not just randomly operating in various nominal, epiphenomenal ways that we can't track using induction. It operates in a very specific way. I'll give you a little example here. When a surgeon works with some biotech firm to develop a fake heart that's nearly identical, would you say they developed something that with a purpose and a function?
Sure, yeah, because they're mimicking a biological organ.
But they're mimicking something that, under your view, doesn't actually have purpose and function. It has an accidental behavior, right?
These accidental behaviors accumulate over time. So you're looking at the end result of billions of years of evolution and saying, look how hyper specific the function of all these organs are, and they all work together in this amazing way. But that's simply because there's been so much time.
So much time. Every time.
Well, then by his definition, then we're still evolving. So in another million years, humans could develop a new organ, I guess, who knows, maybe with all the screens we're looking at, maybe we'll evolve to have natural blue light defenses. I have no idea, but he's still we're still developing according to him. So we could evolve to something else. But again, I ask, if that's the case, then how come there's not different types of species of humans though? How come there isn't any different types of humans that have evolved? How come we're not living side by side with this different kind of human that could breathe fire or some kind of defense mechanism? How come humans that live in the cold, how come they haven't naturally evolved to have this warmer type of fur or something that's over them that's natural, so they could live in the cold?
Hold on. Jed, does time cause milk to spoil?
Milk spoils over time.
No, I didn't say whether you require time. I'm asking, does time cause milk to spoil?
Time is a necessary component, but it may not be the cause.
Well, it's not the cause, because I could put milk in the fridge, right? Time goes by, it doesn't spoil, right?
Well, it will eventually, right?
Okay, well, different times, right? Generally speaking, when we're referring to spoiled milk, you leave milk out, there's a certain time frame in which it spoils. The reason I'm bringing this up is time doesn't cause things. Time allows for the thing you're claiming is caused. And I think we agree there. But
so you mentioned this notion of incomprehensible time. So little changes can add up into big changes over time. So here's an example. So if we look at the way mountains form, I don't know if you believe in plate tectonics, but when plates smash into each other, they can form mountains. And we can track the height of a mountain. It might grow 2 or 3 inches every year. So these are really small incremental changes. You're looking at those changes and going, there's no way a whole mountain that's 5,000 feet in the air could ever form with these little changes. There's no way these could ever add up over time. But just logic alone tells us that if you add 2 inches over 2 inches over 2 inches, eventually you get to a 5,000 foot mountain.
Jen, I appreciate the attempt at the analogy, but there's no function of a mountain. We're talking about hyper-specific functionality inside biology, like a liver and a mind or a brain and a heart that does very specific tasks. Now,
that's a good thing that Jim Bob caught that, because yeah, absolutely, the mountain is just a product of something. It doesn't actually have a function. And Jim Bob was smart enough to catch that and bring it back to how the functionality of the liver and the heart, they have very specific functions and they operate in a very specific way. And so, yeah, like that's why he's asking about the evolution. How does it evolve to work in this specific way?
Body is super complex with a lot of components, a lot of which we don't even fully understand. And so the mountain forming from some sort of disaster or plate movement is not even close to analogous to evolution causing over a long period of time hyper-specific tasks with otherwise unrelated particular elements of the body. For instance, when the liver develops, is it developing with some sort of communication, even if it's pure biology, with another thing called the developing heart? Like these things you said work together, right? Inside the body, they work together as a holistic system. But evolution reduces to a nominal view, which is to say you're only really looking at particular things doing particular things. So a particular part of the body is doing a particular thing, even granting your deep time over a long period of time. The section that you would in the future call a liver would finally become a liver, right? Would be over time, but it would be unrelated to the other things growing, and yet they need to work together. So yes, even though didn't come prepared to make the irreducible complexity argument, I would argue that it's on you to explain how independent, unrelated particular mechanisms develop hyper-specific functionality unrelated to each other, but in conjunction with each other. How does evolution do that mechanically?
Well, again, you're looking at the end result of billions of years of evolution.
It's not end result, though.
It is. We are the end result of billions of years of evolution.
No, we're not. We're not evolving right now. The heart isn't on its way to being something else. Okay, so
well, I don't know if it's on its way to being something else, but everything is constantly evolving.
That means that you can't say there's an end result. Yeah. To say there's a heart that does
I never said there was an end result. Well, sorry,
is it possible that
what I'm saying is that you're looking at hearts now as the end result.
So, okay, cool. So you don't take an approach that there's a thing called a human being, and all the parts in the human being serve, for the most part, a clear function. Even the ones we might think are vestigial or ambiguous, it's likely that we might look further and maybe see a function in the future. But for the most part, our kneecaps, the joints, how the joints are lubricated, the movement, our necks, our brains, they all serve a function to the whole, right?
It's just amazing. Works. Yeah, it's amazing how evolution can form this.
It's amazing.
Incredibly complex. It sure is.
Yeah, no, I would no. It said you said it's amazing. I would actually be amazed if you could tell me how it happens.
Yeah, exactly. He just calls it amazing. Just because he calls it amazing, it doesn't mean it is amazing. You know what is amazing? God and his creations, like us. But in all honesty, again, he deflects. Jim Bob talks about how all of these atheists, these people who believe in evolution. By the way, not all atheists believe in evolution, by the way, but this guy's an atheist and he believes in evolution, so he fits in that category. they skip the details, and they don't tell you how it evolves over time. Like what they should, I mean, and it's impossible to measure because it takes millions of years. Humans, we don't live that long, unless we start a study now and we encourage this study to go on over time. Like that's the only way we could figure out, is evolution even real or not? But yeah, absolutely. Jim Bob's 100% correct. Like all of our organs and such, they have a very specific function, and they function specifically in a certain way in the body. How does it evolve to do that? And how does it start out? Does it just a little portion of a liver just kind of sprout out, the little attachment to it? Does it just sprout out? Does it just kind of appear floating in our body? Like, how does it work? And even if it were to just kind of, start off as a little section, well, then what happens? Does then my offspring then get this little section as well? And then their offspring, and then their offspring. And then eventually, as the generations go on, more and more of it develops somehow. And how do they all develop into the same thing? How do they all develop in the same thing? How come we don't have these humans over here where it's like, well, it started off developing as a liver, but it turned into something else. And then these people over here turned into something else. These people over here, it's a liver, and so on and so forth. Like, again, if this were all true, how come we don't have different types of humans walking around, different species of humans, if you will? You look in all the other animal groups, there's different types of a species of these animals, but you don't have different types of humans that function differently overall. You have different looking humans, but you don't have different functioning humans. So for instance, a cat doesn't function the same way as the tiger. The cat can, while they're both similar and they could both do similar things, the tiger can run faster than a cat. It could hunt bigger animals than a cat can. How come we don't have that same thing for humans? How come we don't have, this is a different type of species of humans over here? Again, species that live in the cold areas, that live in Alaska or something, how come they haven't evolved to have thick coats of fur or something? Those humans over there, they have thick fur for where they're in the cold climate. How come there's not that? So if this were absolutely real, then again, we would be able to see in real time. Wouldn't you think? Wouldn't you think we'd be able to see it in real time if evolution were a real thing? Like just by seeing different types of humans. So that's the thing about evolution. And I haven't heard a good explanation for it. So what do you think about that, evolutioners? I think Jim Bob absolutely cooked here. But what did you guys think? Leave a comment in the comment section below. Please subscribe to my channel. If you want to see this full debate, check out the Raging Tomatoes channel, and also check out Jim Bob's channel. It is both up on their channels. I don't know this dude's channel, but you could look up the Flying Spaghetti Auditor too if you're interested in seeing more of him. And the link to the original video is down below. I'll see you guys later, and also make sure you check out the Cool Stream Live Mondays through Fridays at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time.